Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to Power for Your Purpose. This is the place where faith meets wellness and where your healing has a purpose, okay? I'm Coach Veda Golston, and I am the transformational health and wellness power coach. And I am your sister and I am your guide on this journey of becoming the greater, higher, more powerful version of yourself. Okay. Now we are still in our affirmation series, you guys, and I think this is affirmation number 16. I'm going to do 30 of these bad boys, okay? Because affirmations are a bridge. It's a bridge between thought and action. Okay? And what we do determines how we think will determine what we do and the choices that we make that will contribute to walking in the power of our purpose. All right? So I want you to take a moment, you guys, to like, subscribe, and share this message with somebody who needs encouragement. They might need some clarity and restoration. Okay? So, we're going to speak some life today, you guys, over our minds, over our bodies, and over our purpose. Okay? And we're going to speak life holistically because holistic well-being is not a suggestion. Okay? It is our spiritual responsibility. Okay? And so I use my P.E.P.S framework when I do these affirmations because I want to drive home the truth that what we speak affects every part of our being. Okay? Our psychological being, our emotional being, our physical being, and our spiritual being. Okay? And so I use my P.E.P.S framework. Put some peps in your steps. Not energy, but wellness, okay? And today's affirmation, you guys, is it's a powerful one. I'm choosing affirmations that are biblically based, okay? And biblically sound, and affirmations taken from the Bible that encourages us to be more aware of how we need to think and believe about who we are in God. Okay? So the Bible tells us to be many things. It encourages us to become many things, okay? And in this affirmation, it encourages us to be sober-minded. Today's affirmation, you guys, is I am sober-minded. I want you guys to let that settle in, okay? I am sober-minded. The Bible tells us to be sober-minded. But what does it mean, right, to be sober-minded? We might have an idea of what it means based on how we were raised and what we were taught as we were brought up in church, right? But I just want to break it down, put a little different spin on it to get to the root of the truth of how this affirmation applies to our overall well-being, okay? So to be sober-minded is simply to be clear, to be aware, and to be grounded, okay? It means that your thoughts, they aren't hijacked by your emotions. And then your decisions aren't ruled by impulse. Okay? To be sober-minded means that your spirit isn't intoxicated by distractions or deception and delusions. Okay? Now, this affirmation is rooted, in 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 8. And it says, be sober-minded. Be watchful. Because your adversary, the devil, he prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Yeah, think about that. The devil is just going back and forth, looking for somebody to ruin their life. All right? So being sober-minded, it's not just about avoiding physical intoxication. Okay? Sometimes when we think about when we say sober, we think, about alcohol. Let's be honest, right? But being sober-minded is not about the physical intoxication, you guys. It's about refusing to live mentally intoxicated, okay, by overwhelm, overthinking, and overindulgence, or even intoxicated by the approval of others. Think about that. Yeah. Not being intoxicated by the approval of others. Yeah. So I want to break this down through the P.E.P.S framework because, of course, psychological, emotional, physical, and spiritual health all impact our ability to be sober-minded. Okay? And we're going a little bit deep today, you guys. Okay? Because, a lot starts in the mind, right? A lot of stuff starts in the mind. So, psychologically, okay, being sober-minded, it means that you're going to discipline your thoughts. Okay? You're not going to allow your mind to spiral out of control, to spiral without supervision. Okay? So, when your mind is like that, you have to tell yourself, I'm not crazy. Okay? Because you're not crazy. You're just crowded with unprocessed thoughts. Think about it. You're not crazy. You're just crowded. You're crowded with unprocessed thoughts. Unprocessed thoughts are like unopened mail. Okay? Just because it's sitting in your mind, it doesn't mean it's been read, sorted, or responded to. How many times do we let mail pile up on our tables? Guilty. Okay? Think about when you look at that mail piled up on your table. Think about the thoughts piled up in your mind that are unprocessed. Yeah. And until you address this, it's going to clutter your clarity and it competes with God's truth. Yeah. Now, I want to give you some examples of unprocessed thoughts to make it a little bit more clear. Okay? One unprocessed thought could be, man, I always mess things up. Yeah. Now, when you think that, it could very well be rooted in past failures or even childhood criticisms. One criticism goes a long way. Okay? And, that thought is unprocessed because it hasn't been held up against God's grace and God's truth. So instead of unpacking the why behind this belief of, I always mess up, we accept it as a part of our identity. Yeah. So we need to reframe that and say, you know what? The mistakes that shaped me, okay, they're not going to define me. Yeah. Mistakes are flaws. Okay? And you are uniquely flawed. Okay? And your flaws carry power for your future. All right? So your mistakes, yeah, they may have shaped you, but they don't define you. How about if you think people always leaving me? Could that be rooted in abandonment, trauma, or the need to always be attached to someone? Hmm. Yeah. When you say people always leaving me, this is so unprocessed because we never examined whether we're projecting past hurt onto present people in our life. You see? And so this thought, it might cause you to sabotage healthy and safe relationships. You see, so everybody isn't the people who left you because God sends new people for new seasons, right? Another thought, um, if I don't do it, no one will. Could it be rooted in control, fear of disappointment, or pressure to perform? Yeah, and this is unprocessed because we never asked ourselves, is this God's assignment for my purpose, or is it anxiety about my purpose? Yeah, this thought, you guys, can lead to burnout and a distortion of what it means to be independent. Okay? It's not your job to hold everything together. It's God's job to hold it together. All right? And how about when you think about people who might be mad at you? They probably mad at me. Could that be rooted in people pleasing? Or even rejection? Or even being oversensitive? Or having self-doubt? Okay, this is unprocessed because we didn't even check if this statement was a fact or a fear-based assumption that we made. Yeah, and this often can lead to being overly apologetic or even withdrawing from people altogether. You see? So don't tell yourself that you should be further along by now, okay? Because that's rooted in comparison and timelines that culture tries to set for you, okay? Or even if your dreams are delayed, okay? You start saying things to yourself, and it's unprocessed because it's based on pressure and not God's divine timing. And it keeps us rushing instead of resting in God's peace and resting in God's pace and his timing. God isn't late. Okay? God's timing helps to refine you. God uses his wisdom of timing to help refine you. Okay? So we have to think about these things, you guys. And it's not about perfection at all. It's about intentional mental stewardship. Okay? Now, let's talk about examples of being psychologically sober-minded. Yeah. So when you are psychologically sober, these are the things that you do. You journal before you react. You journal to process out a thought. Okay? And you ask yourself, is this thought mine, or did I inherit it from trauma or from people and culture? Yeah, you have to practice mental decluttering through prayer, sometimes through fasting, through meditation, through worship, and through stillness. Yeah, stillness is a strategy, you guys. You know, one of a, a common struggle that we have is that we can overthink and we can overprocess. Okay? But in being sober mindedness psychologically, we have to exercise discernment. Discernment, because mental clarity is a spiritual weapon. So I don't want you to surrender to confusion. Okay? I want you to seek after mental clarity. Now let's talk emotional. Okay? So to be emotionally sober-minded is to honor your feelings. Right? You let your feelings in the car, but you don't let them drive the car. Okay? And you don't allow yourself to be emotionally fragile. You allow yourself to be emotionally available, where you're able to feel what you feel and identify what you feel and process what you feel. And that is strength. Okay? So, examples of emotional sobriety would be pausing before replying to an emotional trigger. Things tend to trigger us and we react out of our emotions, right? But sometimes we just have to pause before replying. Yeah. So here's a scenario, okay? Practical example. How about when you receive a text that feels very dismissive or very sharp? It cuts like a knife. Right? Your default reaction is going to be that you want to respond with an attitude or you want to shut down altogether. Yeah. But you just wait 5 minutes. You breathe. And you ask yourself, what part of me feels disrespected? And is this rooted in this moment? Or is this rooted in some past pain? Yeah, because every trigger, it doesn't need a reaction. Triggers need a reflection. Yeah. How about if you're in the middle of a heated conversation? Yeah. Someone asks a question about the decision that you made in a tone that is like they're reprimanding you, right? And they do this in front of other people. Your default reaction is going to be that you want to defend yourself or even raise your voice. I know that I'm guilty of that. Okay? But I'm learning to pause, okay? And maybe say, I hear you. I hear you. But I'm going to take a moment to just come back to this. Okay? We're going to press pause. Okay? Because pausing isn't weakness, you guys. It's wisdom. And it gives your spirit a chance to lead instead of your ego and your emotions leading you. You see? Yeah. And have you guys ever experienced, or have you ever been in a very vulnerable situation that drew a lot of family criticism? Yeah. A family member criticizes your parenting, they criticize your weight, or they even criticize your faith walk. Yeah, your default reaction is going to be embarrassment. I hate being embarrassed. Yeah, and you want to fire back, or you want to leave, right? Yeah, but okay, emotional sobriety, emotional sober-mindedness will cause us to pause, right? And silently quote a scripture or something that's going to bring us back, okay? Or step out somewhere and take a breath before you reply, okay? Because silence can be a very sacred space when your soul needs a few seconds to align itself with the truth so you can respond out of clarity and power. Okay? Now, I know you guys, a lot of times we can get triggered by social media, right? You see a post that makes you feel maybe kind of left out, little jealous, kind of overlooked, you know. Of course, a default would be to kind of like, make a little comment, do a little sub tweet, maybe unfollow the person, or maybe post something that's kind of passive aggressive, right? But we have to be sober minded emotionally. And we have to say to ourselves, you know what? This is not about them. This is a sign that I need to check in with God about me. Yeah. You guys, you don't have to put your peace in someone else's story. Meaning, okay, your peace, you give it up because of what you saw of someone else's fabulous story, right? Or someone else's comment, or someone else's bragging. Okay? You don't let go of your peace because of that. No, you have to be emotionally sober. Okay? So when you have emotional sobriety, it means that you recognize when your emotions are telling you the truth. You say, is my emotions telling a truth, or is my emotions just telling a story? Yeah. So an example would be if your emotions are telling you the truth, this means that you might feel anxious every time you walk in a room of people that you have to meet with, or something of that magnitude. And what happens is your body, it can remember how you maybe felt dismissed or maybe overlooked the last time you did that. That anxiety rises up because you think it's going to happen again. But the anxiety is actually alerting you that, you're in an environment that you might feel that your voice is not going to be heard, or maybe you don't feel safe in this environment. Okay? So that's like an early warning sign, you guys, to be more self-aware. Okay? And it actually invites you to protect your peace in that situation and not punish yourself for feeling that. So when you feel that in those kind of situations, you be your authentic self and you deliver what you have. You contribute what you have, and you trust God for the rest. Okay? Because truthfully, if it was a situation where God did not want you to be, then he perhaps would not have allowed it. So if he allowed it, he got you. Yeah. And sometimes, our emotions tell us the truth so that we can be self-aware, right? But sometimes our emotions tell a story. Oh, our emotions tell a story. Yeah. You know, like when a friend don't respond to your text and you done sent the text 8 o'clock in the morning and it's 8 o'clock at night. And you instantly feel some kind of way. You feel rejected, right? And you tell yourself, oh, they mad at me. I must have done something wrong. I always get left out. But the truth is, they were just busy at work, busy with the kids, maybe had an emergency, and they didn't even see the message. So, you guys, not every feeling is a fact. Okay? So, sober mindedness is going to ask you, what's true about this? And what's just fear playing over and over again in my mind and in my emotions? Emotions are great messengers, but they are terrible masters. And that's why we have to master our emotions. And we do this by inviting God into the conversation before we accept the conversation as truth. Okay? So we have to have emotional sobriety. What does that mean? It means that you don't project internal chaos into or onto innocent people. Okay? What does that mean? I'll give you an example. Let's say your child spills something by accident and you explode in anger. Yeah, the reality is that you're not really mad at them, are you? Maybe you're just overwhelmed, exhausted, or maybe you haven't rested in days. Think about it. Sometimes we punish people for problems that they did not create. Okay? So when we project like that, it's really just misdirected pain. Yeah. How about if your spouse or your significant other says something lighthearted, but you take it personally and you shut down? Could the reality be that you're still carrying the weight of unhealed criticism from a previous relationship? Yeah. You see, if you don't heal the wound from previous relationships, you're going to see every word that the person in the current relationship says through the lens of the hurt that you experienced in the past. Yeah. And how about if a coworker gets promoted and you feel some kind of way and you distance yourself and you start to critique them harshly? Okay? Maybe you're projecting your own fear of stagnation and disappointment. Yeah. You see, sober mindedness, you guys, it's not going to judge others for excelling and thriving and achieving. Sober mindedness is going to confront the chaos that makes you feel unworthy to receive your own blessings and to make your own achievements and to reach your own goals. You see, when we project like that, we don't allow ourselves to look in the mirror and examine our own wounds. I'm going to say that again, you guys. When we project on other people, we don't allow ourselves to look in the mirror and examine our own wounds. How is that helping us long term? But when you're sober-minded, you can say, you know what, this is not about them. This is something in me that needs truth. That needs truth. Okay? Feeling something deeply, you guys, doesn't mean that you're unstable. It means that you're human. It means that you're self-aware. And it means that you need to give yourself some grace. You need to have self-compassion. Okay? When you're sober-minded, you don't allow yourself to be numb and not feel, or suppress and not express. You allow God to filter your emotions through His truth. All right? Now let's move on to the physical. I know I can stay on emotions all day because so much plays out through our emotions, right? But we're going to talk about the physical aspect of I am sober-minded. Okay? Because even your body plays a role in sober-mindedness. Okay? Now, think about sleep deprivation. That can mimic being intoxicated. Okay? What about poor nutrition? It can fog your decision making. And then inflammation in your body. It can affect clarity in your mind. Okay? So let's explore some root causes of these areas, okay? Let's talk about sleep deprivation. Where does that come from? Well, it comes from unregulated thoughts. Thoughts that are just all out of control. They're racing. You have mental overload. You start replaying past conversations in your mind. Yeah. And the brain is always in an alert mode. Okay? You know, a restless mind often points to an area that we haven't fully surrendered to God. Yeah, and if your mind does not rest, you need to check what your spirit is still holding on to. Yeah. And then, you know, these unprocessed emotions, you guys, of suppressed grief, of fear, of anxiety, and even too much excitement. It can dysregulate your sleep cycles. Okay? I always say broken sleep is no sleep. Okay? And then, you know, a lot of times we may carry these stress in our dreams. Okay? But, you know, sometimes we have trusted God so much with our eternity, but not with our rest. Right? Not with our nighttime rest. Yeah. And then sleep deprivation it can be caused by not setting boundaries about what you watch. Okay? Having unhealthy bedtime routines and drinking too much caffeine or you know, too many drinks that contains caffeine. It doesn't have to be coffee all the time. It can be Mountain Dew or something else. Okay? So, you know, a lack of routine, healthy routine, it sends the body mixed signals That's chaos. And the body doesn't know when to rest. And it won't know if you don't teach it how to rest. Okay, and then spiritual warfare can cause a lot of sleep deprivation as well. Yeah, sleeplessness is an attack of the enemy to keep you exhausted and vulnerable so that you won't produce fruit. Think about Jesus. He often prayed. He went away by himself and he prayed. He prayed at night while other people slept. Okay? There's power in the night while others are sleeping and everything is quiet. There's power in that. Okay? It gives your body a chance to restore itself. Yeah. So we have to ask the Lord, Lord, guide my rest. Renew my mind and silence every lying spirit that disturbs my peace. Okay? Now, what about poor nutrition as a root cause? Yeah. We do a lot of emotional eating, right? We use food as comfort or reward due to stress, sadness, and boredom. Okay? Sometimes we're not hungry, we're just hurting. And many of us in the faith-based community, we are full. We make ourselves full, but we are not really being fed because we're seeking quick comfort over long-term nourishment. Yeah. Poor nutrition comes from a lack of health literacy, understanding how to manage your health well. Many people don't know how to read food labels. They don't know how to plan balanced meals. They don't know how to identify a nutritional deficiency. So educating ourselves on these things is a source of empowerment for our minds. Yeah. And, many of us, we become malnourished because we choose convenience, and, we get busy, we get burned out. We eat what's fast, what's accessible. Sometimes it happens, but it should not be a continuous pattern of that. Okay, because what's fueling us needs to be able to sustain us too. Okay, so fast food, you guys, we have to learn how to curb it. Okay, because it doesn't help the process of healthy healing, not psychologically, not emotionally, physically, or spiritually. Okay? And, I have to touch on chronic inflammation because that can come from unmanaged stress. Yeah, you see, we can't live in a fight or flight mode all the time and expect to flourish and be fruitful. Okay, because that inner chaos, this is how it manifests in inflammation. And then chronic inflammation at that. Okay? Which can come from a diet high in processed foods. Okay? Processed meats, a lot of sugar. All of this contributes to inflammation. And when your body is going through this chronic inflammation, it's actually crying out for help before disease settles in. You see? Yeah. We have to think about these things. So, what you don't express, your body will. And sometimes our mood isn't spiritual. It's nutritional. Right? So, we have to think about these things that affect our body and prevent us from being sober-minded. And examples of physical sobriety is going to be hydrating ourselves so our brain functions well. Okay? Getting enough rest before you make major decisions. And then backing off on things that stimulate us too much, because the stimulants increase our anxiety. Okay? So we got to steward our temple. Yeah. Now let's talk spiritual. Okay? Here's where everything comes into alignment. Okay? Because to be sober-minded spiritually is to be anchored in truth and alert in the warfare. Okay? What does that mean, Coach V? Well, an example would be like if you get an unexpected bill that really strains your budget. Okay? Your default temptation is going to be to panic, to spiral into fear, or to become anxious and start hustling, right? But being sober-minded snaps us back and says, you know what? I got to pause and pray and declare Philippians 4:19. My God shall supply all my needs according to his riches in glory through Christ Jesus. Yeah, and you got to anchor yourself in truth before reacting in fear. Okay? How about if somebody betrays you? Betrays your trust and they gossip about you? Yeah, of course we're going to want to retaliate and isolate ourselves or even rehearse the offense over and over again. But we have to be sober-minded and respond by recognizing that, you know what, this is a strategy that the devil uses through offense, and we have to pray for discernment instead of revenge. Okay? Yeah, we have to stay alert in the warfare of this, you guys, knowing that Satan just wants to sever our God-ordained connections with him. Yeah, because the devil, what he will try to do is he will try to open healed wounds. He will try to come through unhealed wounds. And he will try to make fresh wounds. Yeah. So we have to have that discernment and stay alert in the warfare. Okay? And then sometimes we might think, I'm not called for this. Maybe we're rejected, and because of one episode of rejection, we say, you know what, this ain't for me. So we're going to withdraw. We're going to doubt our assignment. We're going to start comparing ourselves to other people. But we have to be sober-minded and respond and take those thoughts captive and declare God's word over our life. What did God say? For I know the plans that I have for you. Plans of a good future, right? Plans of blessings. Okay, that means that you're alert to the enemy's attempt to plant lies in your mind about your purpose, because you're going to fight it with biblical truth. Yeah. So, you guys, sometimes we have to be spiritually sober-minded so that we stay in awareness. Okay? We have to know that the enemy tries to sow this confusion. He uses distraction. I want to take a moment for us to pray and declare this together. All right? And I want you to repeat after me. God, thank you for clarity of mind. God, I surrender every distraction. I surrender every lie. I surrender every emotional high that keeps me intoxicated with confusion. Yeah. God, I receive a sound mind that's rooted in your word and regulated by your peace. Yeah. Declare it with me. I walk in discernment. I walk in awareness. I walk in spiritual maturity. And I am sober-minded. In Jesus' name. Yes. Yes. Declare it, you guys. Declare it. Declare it as you become the fullness of it. Okay? And I want to thank you for staying with me as I unpack this affirmation. I am sober-minded. Thank you for watching this episode. And if this message spoke to your spirit, I want you to make sure you hit like, subscribe, share it with somebody, you guys, who needs to come back to their sound mind. Okay? Because I want to build this community so that people can experience the healing and the wholeness that they need. One declaration and affirmation at a time to walk in the power of their purpose. Okay? Because when your mind is clear, you walk in the fullness of your power for your purpose. All right? And before I go, I want to invite you guys. I'm so excited. In 2 weeks, August 23rd, I am going to be in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I'm sending a shout out to all my North Carolina peeps. Okay? Come and join me at the Hamilton, August the 23rd. It is the third leg of the tour, Uniquely Flawed, the Conversation. Okay? It's not an event, you guys. It's a movement. All right? It's a space where we come together, where our flaws are not hidden, but they are honored. Yeah, it's where healing happens in a community of like-minded people. And it's where your voice, your story, and your purpose collide with power. Now, we say it like this, you guys. Flaws are seen as far-reaching and more impactful than the complexities they're established in. I'm going to be teaming up again with Dr. Tijuana Smith-Pittman and Dr. Tanise Lewis. I'm so excited. Registration is required, you guys, and seats are limited. So I'm going to leave information in the description area for you to go ahead and register. Tag a friend, tag a neighbor, tag anybody, okay? And I want you to meet us there. It's going to be a powerful, powerful time, all right? And I want you to remember, don't hide yourself anymore. I want you to start showing up, okay? As a person who is anchored, aware, and sober-minded, all right? Until next time, you guys, stay blessed, stay grounded, all right? And never forget, you're built for this. And there is power for your purpose. I'm Coach V, signing out. God bless. Take care. I'll see you next time.